the topic of mortality. Have you thought about it? And what is it like for a mind to come to this existence and then to go away?
I have never been bothered by the idea of my own mortality. I'm no more bothered by the thought that I will be dead than the thought that for billions of years I didn't exist before I was born. That's the way it is. I've got a life to live now. I'm living it. I'm loving it. There's those that I love. There's the projects and things that I love. I'm very happy to be alive. I am grateful to many people and many things. I am grateful for all the goodness that has evolved in this world. That's enough.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel awe of being here, of having gone through this whole thing?
It's fantastic. I was talking to one of the leaders in AI recently, and he said, "Dan, isn't it wonderful that we got to live in this amazing age?" And I thought, yes, I am so, there's nobody to thank, but I'm so glad that I have been able to live at this exciting, wonderful, joyous time with all these amazing things and transitions happening.
A couple of months ago, I had the great privilege of conducting a 1-hour interview with renowned philosopher and cognitive scientist Daniel Dennett, one of the most influential thinkers of our time. Sadly, Professor Dennett passed away recently in April 19th at the age of 82, making this one of his final interviews. In our discussion, we covered a wide range of fascinating topics: the nature of consciousness, advancements in artificial intelligence, tips for critical thinking, advice for the next generation of philosophers and scientists, and poignantly, his reflections on life and mortality. Little did I know that his profound response to my question about mortality would be one of his last, or maybe the very last, public statement on the subject before his passing. Beyond the interview itself, I had the honor of spending additional time with Professor Dennett during the UM6P University Science Week event in Morocco. He was a kind, open-minded person. When I asked him how to address him during the interview, Professor Dennett said, "Just call me Dan." In one of his earlier works, Dennett had designed a question to test whether AI has passed a key cognitive capability threshold. The question he would ask an AI would go as follows. If you take the capital letter D, rotate it 90 degrees and place the capital letter J underneath it, which weather would that suggest? Most of us humans would answer this question by summoning our visual imagination capability. During our lunch discussion, he brought up this test. So I took my mobile phone and submitted the question to the Claude 3 Opus model. Claude 3 nailed the answer. Dennett later expressed awe and gratitude about living in these exciting times and seeing the dream of AI, which his scientific community eagerly awaited since the 1960s, starting to be realized before his eyes. While Daniel Dennett may no longer be with us, his immense legacy and impact on modern philosophical thought will undoubtedly live on and continue to inspire new groundbreaking work that pushes human knowledge forward. I'm excited to share this special interview with you today. I hope you find Professor Dennett's insights as compelling and thought-provoking as I did. I would like to thank UM6P Science Week organizers for inviting Dennett to Morocco and facilitating this discussion. If you like this conversation, make sure to subscribe to the channel, press the like button, and please feel free to share your reflections in the comment section below. Dear viewers and listeners, Professor Daniel Dennett. Dan, thank you so much for making the time for this. It's an honor to have you.
Delighted to be with you, Najib.
Great. How has it been so far in Morocco?
It's been fascinating. I've entered a world I had no conception of and no idea about. There was such a place as the University of M6P. It's fantastic.
Oh, great. Have you been in Morocco before?
No, never before.
Great. In the region?
The reason I haven't been here is life is short.
Yeah, great. Good. Well, welcome again, and I hope you like what you've seen so far.
Yes.
Great. So let me go through a couple of pre-questions or a couple of questions just to set the ground, and then we go through the theme of the mind, and then we go through other related themes, AI, and then philosophy of science, and so on. But before that, I wanted just to ask you about something I heard in your lecture on Monday, which is a very fascinating way to have a civic conversation with people, including people you disagree with. And you mentioned the Rappaport Rules. So can you tell us that again, or walk us through them?
These were invented or proposed by Anatole Rappaport, who was a social psychologist, a theorist, and the originator of the tit for tat policy in the prisoner's dilemma game. A very interesting man. I never met him, but in Rappaport's rules, before you criticize somebody for their work in any field, your first job is to articulate the thesis that your target has so well that your target says, yes, I wish I'd thought of putting it that way. That's, of course, a very tall order, but it's a great ideal to strive for. And every now and then, you may succeed.
Second, some people call. I heard some people call this steel manning an argument as opposite to straw manning someone. So it's a sort of it's the opposite. You want to make the argument so good that it's even stronger.
Yes, steel manning.
Yeah.
I haven't heard that term, but that's good. Yes, the whole idea is that it counteracts the idea of reductio ad absurdum, where people are deliberately looking for embarrassing ways of putting the thesis. The second point is anything that you've learned from your target that your target has persuaded you of, you should mention that.
Oh.
Third, anything that you and target agree about that a lot of people don't. Only after you've done those three things should you say, number four, now you can criticize. And when you do that, your target is very attentive and takes you seriously because you clearly understand the position being held, and you've learned something, and you agree about some things. So it's a good way of getting into constructive contact with whoever you're criticizing.
Right. So it made me think of a quote by someone called Ibn al-Haytham, which is one of the scholars from the golden age of science.
Oh yeah,
yeah, al-Haytham, but his approach was more as an individual. If you're trying to seek the truth, you would want to put yourself as an opponent to whatever you're reading. And then he goes on and says, and then you have to question yourself while doing this process, so that you have a fair representation.
That's good, yeah.
But the Rappaport rules are more as a collective way in which you have two people or multiple people.
Yes.
So in your talk again on Monday, you put an emphasis on this collective way of gaining knowledge about the world. Can you talk?
But the individual question that you want to ask yourself is, what if I'm wrong?
Yeah.
And that's not a question that's asked enough by many people. In fact, I've been amused by, for instance, a right-wing Christian leader, and I asked him, do you ever ask yourself, what if I'm wrong? No, never, no. In fact, that's discouraged. And I think that's one of the most socially dangerous or pernicious features of religion is not just licensing a lack of skepticism, but commanding it, saying, do not even think about whether this is true. Do not question anything from the religion. That's, I think, it's an obvious feature of religions to protect them from internal evolution, and it's a dangerous one.
Well, I would agree with that as long as we put an asterisk on the word religion, or we say some forms of religion.
Some forms of
the word religion can be wide and can apply even to philosophies like Buddhism or other types.
Yes, it can be wonderful, but the forms that are not just dogmatic, but also that discourage or prohibit doubt, those are dangerous.
Yeah, so that's the dogmatic thinking is what we're talking about here. And again, the scholar I mentioned, Ibn al-Haytham, when he said question yourself, I think the word he used was accuse yourself. So he's saying accuse yourself whenever you're يتهم نفسك, to accuse yourself when you're doing this process of trying to seek the truth. So these ideas are have been, it's a human heritage that have been developed by
and sometimes it's surprising what you discover about yourself.
Yeah,
you can discover that you have a dislike of an idea. You don't know why you dislike it. You just know you don't like the idea. There's ideas like that I don't like. I hope they're false.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move now to the topic of the mind, which is one of the topics you spent a lot of time on. Obviously, the Consciousness Explained book is one of the landmarks in the area. What is happening now? So right now, I can see this chair. I can see colors. I can hear your voice when you speak. I can smell. I can have sensations throughout my body. I can even have memories coming from my mind, and it feels special. It feels awesome. It feels something out of this world, if you want to put it between quotes.
Yes.
And what is it? What is this? What's going on?
I'm going to answer. And a lot of people really don't like this answer, but I think it's as close to the truth as I can get. What evolution has provided for you is a wonderful user interface with the world. The world is made up of atoms and quarks and electrons and photons, and it's unbelievably complicated, as we know from science. But we are blessed with an oversimplification of the world. That's the world we live in. It's the world of solid chairs and liquids and colors and sunsets and words and money and all the things of the world, the tools of the world that we have, that we can instantly recognize, and they are, we're comfortable with them. We know what to do with them. And the psychologist James Gibson, J.J. Gibson, called these affordances. A chair affords sitting. A cup affords drinking. And when I reach for the cup, I know what to expect. I am projecting from past experiences with cups, what it's going to be like. And if there's something crazy about the cup, if it's glued to the table, or if it's soft, or if the water in it is not water but solid plastic, I'll be very surprised. Well, you can't be surprised unless you were expecting something else. So we live in a world of expectation. What brains are for is for predicting the immediate future. And the way it does this is to give us a user illusion, which is a very good thing, of the world. In the same way that your cell phone gives you a user illusion. You touch it and you move things and so forth, and that's an oversimplification of what's going on. You don't want to know the details of what's going on inside your cell phone. It would be impossible to understand. There are literally billions of little electronic events happening that make that wonderful user interface available to you. So nature has provided us with a user interface that we can avail ourselves of. So in one sense, it's illusory. It's because it's an oversimplification.
Right. So this is a functional aspect, or what consciousness is useful for, right?
Yes, and in particular, who's the user?
Oh.
And I'm going to surprise you maybe by saying, I'm the user of your consciousness. You're the user of my consciousness. It's only because you have a sense of what's going on in my mind that you can follow my language, that you can ask good questions, that you can understand what I'm doing. You don't want to know the messy details in my brain. Much too complicated. And so you have a model of my mind that you rely on all the time.
Wow.
And I have a model of yours. So we couldn't interact otherwise.
So that's the so-called theory of mind, right?
Right.
The ability to project.
That's right. But the word theory to call it a theory of mind is a mistake, because it's a theory is hard work, and a theory is science. This just comes naturally.
Yeah. Huh. But there is something more profound. Even if I were born in the jungle without meeting anyone, any other human being, and without even developing language, I would be conscious with my mind.
Yes, but your consciousness might be extraordinarily diminished. When I imagine a human being who, let us say, is this would be a terrible thing. Nobody's ever been in this situation. Raised without any human interaction. It's just fed through tubes or something. Never meets another human being. Just complete isolation. But otherwise, healthy.
There are some cases of feral children, so-called.
Feral
isolated case. Yeah.
Come close, and that's such a terrible phenomenon that we're happy there aren't more of them. We don't want any more experiments of that sort. And I think their consciousness is profoundly disabled and limited compared to ours. And also, I think, the consciousness of a chimpanzee is profoundly limited compared to ours. We naturally imagine that a chimpanzee is basically a person in a chimpanzee suit. and thinking the same sorts of thoughts that we are. No, I don't think so. I think their limitations, which they don't suffer from because they don't know any different. It doesn't bother them that, consider language. There are thousands of chimpanzees that have lived their whole lives in human captivity, in laboratories, in cages, in zoos. They've heard as many words as a human child hears growing up. They are languages all around them from their caretakers, their keepers. They don't pay any attention to it. It's very hard to get a chimpanzee to pay attention to language.
Their brains are not wired to absorb language, unlike human children.
Maybe all it would take is a little genetic change that would make them as eager to understand, as eager to find the patterns in language. And then we could talk to chimpanzees. But I don't think we want to explore that possibility.
So for you, language is intimately connected with consciousness? Or can we have consciousness
language
without?
is intimately connected to our kind of consciousness,
right?
Which we often misattribute to other animals. Strangely enough, here, I almost agree with Descartes. Because Descartes said that animals are just automata, they're not conscious at all. And he was much criticized for that and reviled. And it's, of course, they're conscious in some sense, and they can feel pain, they can anticipate pain, they can suffer. But they can't worry about things the way we worry.
Right.
They can't marvel at things. Here's an example. Right now, imagine putting a plastic bucket over your head and climbing hand over hand up a rope. You can do that, right? I deliberately chose actions and items that a chimpanzee would know well. But could a chimpanzee do that? Could the chimpanzee just daydream about putting a bucket? I don't think so. And you can do it because you can respond to my request. Or you could respond to a request that you make to yourself. Now, I'm not saying that depends entirely on language, but I think that once you have language, you develop the habit of stimulating your own brain in a way that chimpanzees don't. Because they just don't have that set of habits.
So we are already talking about different levels or different forms of consciousness. Consciousness is not a switch 0 to 1.
It's not exactly. There's all different kinds of consciousness, and what you want to do always is see what can they do. What repertoire of activities are enabled by the kind of consciousness they have.
Okay, well, there's activities, and then there's the sentience part. I will get back to it later. The feeling part. You said chimpanzees feel pain. I'll get back to that later. But actually, we can see this variant degrees or forms of consciousness in ourselves as we grow up, because we, all of us, were 1 year old, 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old. And then was there a point at which we became conscious? Did it gradually emerge?
It's gradual. I think it's gradual.
We were a single cell at some point, so we know a single cell. We suppose a single cell is unconscious. Maybe it is. And then we know today we are.
I'm want to discourage you from thinking of consciousness as this extra property that a single cell either has or doesn't have. There's no such kind of consciousness. Single cells can be quite competent. They're agents. They have agendas. They want to communicate with each other. They have ways of improving their circumstances in the world inside your body. So they're intelligent.
Wow.
But they don't know they're intelligent.
Wow.
They don't have to know they're intelligent.
So the word intelligence is why, so you can say this is an intelligence device, but it's a different thing. What is the difference between intelligence and consciousness?
Only degrees. I have said that in AI we want to make smart machines, but not artificial colleagues. An artificial colleague is autonomous and can tell lies and make promises. But you can make a smart machine that can't make promises and that can't tell a lie. It can utter falsehoods, but it can't tell a lie the way a human being can. Not yet. But if we made it autonomous, then it could have free will, it could be responsible.
So what is it about making promises or saying lies that makes it different or special?
Well, I once taught with an AI person. We taught a course on agents and autonomy. Mm-hmm. And I gave the students the project of designing, or just giving the specs, as we say. Just tell me what has to be in the design, not actually achieve this. The specs for an AI agent that you would sign a contract with. Not because this belonged to somebody else and you not
a contract with Microsoft.
Yes.
Yeah, not a contract with Microsoft, a contract with
it. Yeah, where you would be, you would not find this to be an inappropriate or stupid or pointless human gesture or activity. And if you can answer that question, in other words, you're making a promise. And it's making a promise. That's what a contract is.
Well, I know that the current models of artificial intelligence, I know they're not nearly as sophisticated as the human intelligence, but there is already like this game that some people already consider them as other minds. So I can see a way in which you can promise an AI something. Maybe
if your grandmother needs a healthcare assistant, and we provide her with a robot that takes care of her, that plays games with her, that encourages her to watch a television program or to reminds her to take her pills, all the rest of it. So let's imagine now do we want that robot to be eligible to make promises and to be held responsible for failing to keep his promise? If instead of a robot, your family signs a contract with a human being, and this human being then becomes the live-in caretaker for your grandmother, we understand what that involves. We understand that there are things that that person shouldn't do.
Wow.
There are certain obligations to care for your grandmother in a certain way and not to deceive her. Let's consider deception for a moment. Would you want the robot caretaker to tell lies to your grandmother? Well,
depends which side.
Why? Because we think sometimes we shouldn't tell the truth to people when they don't need to know the truth. If your grandmother has a dear friend who has just gone to jail for violence against somebody, don't tell grandmother. She can't do anything about it, and it would hurt her feelings. So we don't tell her. And if she asks, we say no, we lie. But to have an agent that has that kind of role and can be held responsible, that's something very special. And I think we don't want AI caretakers. We want them. I think I'm getting old. I may need a caretaker companion, but I don't want one that I would sign a contract with. You
don't want one you would sign a contract with.
No. No, I want one that if I get bored with it, I can lock it in the closet. I want one that I can take apart without any guilt.
Does it have to be with the agency? But agency for you is even more basic, that in the sense that a helper, a caretaker that you can sign a contract with, is someone that has a sort of evolved agency that can then pursue their own interests instead of yours.
And the reason that I don't want one that I could sign a contract with is because unless it's very different from anything that AI is working on or robotics is working on now, there's a certain invulnerability, a certain potential immortality to an AI system. You can copy it.
Yeah.
There's no reason for such an agent to worry about its reputation, to worry about its future.
Maybe they
could. What I'm trying to do is just to remind you and anybody who's listening that there's a whole world of concern for other people that if a robot is to have that, it's going to need concern for itself, too.
Wow.
And it's going to need to share the fragility, the vulnerability that we have. And we don't want it to have... Well, yeah, here's the way of thinking about it. Suppose, in this familiar science fiction idea, suppose you could be backed up every Friday night, every single cell, so that a complete copy of you was stored every Friday night. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Well, then on Saturday, you could, for fun, jump off the Golden Gate Bridge and plummet to your death. Then you could watch the videotape on Monday when they backed you up and see how you behaved, see what it was like for others to watch you die by falling up. Big deal.
You may or you may not. Maybe the drive for you to not commit suicide is more deeper than even this thought, but the higher level thinking that you can.
But I think a lot of people, when they hear that, think, "Ooh, that would be fun," because I could go skydiving and I could do all sorts of things where I just wouldn't worry about whether I was going to die because I could always, I'd be backed up. I'd lose a day or two that I would have no memory of.
It would be a branch, and you wouldn't be exactly the same person on Saturday and Sunday. And on Monday, you wouldn't be the same. You would be the Friday person.
You'd lose a few days.
Right.
Yeah. Really. So, but I think you can see that person would you trust that?
The person who can be backed up on Friday.
Yeah.
Would you trust him on Saturday and Sunday?
Would you trust him?
At all. Yeah, it comes back to the question of, is there a deep drive in you that prevents you from committing suicide, which would also prevent you from lying and being deceitful,
and killing others. And killing others. The sort of almost immortality that such an agent would have is so different from our predicament that its commitment to morality, to honesty, to concern would be problematic. Let's just leave it at that. It would be problematic. It might care. It might be wonderful. It might be saintly.
It will open a new set of options that were not available.
That's right. And I think we're getting close enough where we've got to start thinking about AI in that way. As I say, I want to keep the AIs not autonomous, so that, as I say, I can take them apart. Because they can always be put back together.
So at the same time...
Or let me... another way to... Sometimes when I've talked about this, people say, well, we'll just put an on-off switch of some sort, a remote control on-off, and you just turn it off. Goes to sleep. Yes, we could make such a remote control button. Sure. Just like our television set. But now, suppose you learned that you somebody has a remote control switch for you. They can turn you off whenever they want. What's your highest priority?
Prevent them from turning the switch.
Yes, getting control of that on-off switch. If we make autonomous agents, one thing we can be pretty sure they're going to want is to get control of that switch.
And by the way, they're actually active projects called autonomous agents in AI, and even the biggest firms are working on autonomy projects or agents.
Yes, I know. That's why I'm talking about it, because I want people to be alert to the fact that there's the autonomy of an automobile, a Tesla. But what if your Tesla says, no, I don't want to take you to Chicago? That's autonomy.
Yeah. So there's a lot of discussions about regulation of artificial intelligence, and one aspect of regulation is to say if some of the models exceed a certain threshold of computational power, then someone, an organization, a governmental or international, should come and look at the details of what you're doing to prevent such scenarios.
Absolutely.
It looks like we are on a big, huge boat that has a huge momentum that is going with its inertia, and steering it is.
And I've been signing the open letters, and I've been raising the alarm about this. I think we have to take seriously that our counterfeit people and autonomous AIs are on the horizon, and we should think very carefully about whether this is a good idea.
Right. Okay. So let's go back to a topic we quickly touched on earlier. It's a more fundamental topic on the nature of the mind, which is the difference between consciousness and sentience. And you said that chimpanzees can feel pain. I know that some researchers have proposed the idea that sentience is even more exists in more in other mammals. You don't need highly evolved brains. What's your take on that? Do you think that are other mammals, for example, sentient in the sense that they feel pain, they feel things in a subjective or a first person?
I think so. But I don't think there's anything that we're puzzling or it doesn't require a revolution in physics to explain. It doesn't require any new special properties. It's just it's a big step on the sliding scale of consciousness. My friend and colleague Nicholas Humphrey argues with considerable plausibility that only warm-blooded animals, birds and mammals, they're the only ones that feel sensations, that really have sensations like pain. Reptiles ants have nociceptors, they have pain systems, but they don't feel them the way we do, or the way a dog can. Now, I haven't made up my mind whether he might be right. He might be. And some people think, well, that's convenient because it means I can eat fish.
And frogs.
Fish and frogs, yes, and crocodiles. I don't have to worry about them. But I think that reaction itself elevates and inflates the idea of sensation, of the role of sensation. People often think and say, and they have Jeremy Bentham utilitarian, it's suffering that matters, not thinking. and that if something can suffer, then we have moral obligations to it. It may not be a moral agent, but it's a moral patient. It is something that we have an obligation to take care of. But let's take that idea seriously, but let's not be sure that there's a bright line there. Why should the difference between a bird's pain system and the crocodile's pain system mark such a moral difference? Or for that matter, why shouldn't we extend moral consideration to, say, trees? I mean, people are then, and I...
Because pain feels so bad for us.
I have been a forester. I've cut down a lot of trees. Never felt the slightest concern for the welfare of the trees that I was cutting down. And I don't think I was doing anything evil or even slightly evil. It's understandable that we would like to have nice, clear, simple rule for how to behave. Don't ever do this. This is wrong. But I think that's more than we can. That's more than we can demand. We can demand it. We can insist on it. We can pass laws, and we can enforce those laws. But we should recognize that there is going to be an element of arbitrariness to them.
Right. But beside the question of rules, but my feeling is that the reason why you don't go and cut, you don't feel bad when cutting a tree, and if you may feel bad if for sure if harming another human being or another warm-blooded animal, is that it's a sort of it's an innate empathy, or you don't want them to suffer because you have felt you have suffered in your life, so you know how bad suffering it is. Yeah. So you want to minimize suffering for others.
Yes,
and that's where science, or at least trying to model the world and understand which species, why do we have sentience? Why do creatures have species? Well, why do creatures have sentience? Which species feel pain and why? The more we understand this question, the more it helps us to take this.
Well, when I was working with Rodney Brooks on the COG project, one of the things that we decided to build into COG was COG, in one of its embodiments, had motors that stuck out from its elbows.
Sorry, so what is the COG project?
Oh, the COG was a humanoid robot.
Right.
It didn't have legs. It was from the waist up. So, but it had arms. And it could damage its arms if it went like this, which it could do. So we built in a system that, in effect, gave it a pain system so that it was strongly disinclined to bump its elbows. We gave it a pain system. We didn't want it poking its eyes out, which it could have done. So we built it. No. Did we give it a pain system? Maybe, if Humphrey is right, we gave it a reptilian pain system. Reptiles don't. The crocodile won't eat its own tail. Might eat another crocodile's tail, but not its own tail.
Okay, but I know that you don't find it as a fundamental distinction between a brain that can feel pain and the actual feeling of pain. For you, are they exactly the same thing, or are they what they call qualia, or is there any?
No,
there is no such a thing for you.
No such thing. No.
Okay.
No, it's a largely benign myth that we can eventually learn is a myth, and then we continue to live by it.
Because it's practical. No way.
And very important. Look, are there colors? Atoms aren't colored. Photons aren't colored. Color is a real pattern, a real phenomenon in the world in which we live. The world of affordances, the everyday manifest image of the world. But otherwise, color isn't real. It's a sort of benign illusion.
Okay, so when I look at this blue or black backdrop, I can see the color of black. And so the light or the photons that hit my eyes and then go to my brain, and that changes the state of my brain,
Yep.
the configuration of my brain.
Yep.
And then I could associate, in principle at least, one configuration with the black color. But is there nothing else other than this called brain configuration? Is it equal? My brain configuration for black is equal to the feeling, to the blackness?
Yes. Yes. This was the main point of my book, Consciousness Explained. There's no medium in which there's transduction into this other medium where you have the qualia.
Right.
There's just no such thing.
But it feels different.
It seems exactly. It seems that way.
Right.
And what you have to realize is it's a jolly good thing that it seems that way. It helps us. It keeps us from hurting our bodies, and it makes us love each other and all the rest. And isn't that wonderful? But don't think there are extra properties. There's the representation of those properties.
Okay, it does something else more than what you said, avoiding to die as an evolutionary, as seen in the evolutionary paradigm. But there's something else. It gives meaning to everything, because if the universe was there, it's not just the tree that falls, but no one witnesses it falling. If there is zero consciousness, sentience consciousness in the universe, does the universe have any? Does it even exist, or does it have any meaning?
Meaning for whom? For what?
Yeah. For whoever is having that experience.
I think that meaning is real and depends on evolution, depends on life. Before there was life, nothing meant anything. Then the birth of life is the birth of meaning. Meaning is the accumulated effect of all of the evolution that has created agents that are designed by evolution to protect themselves and to make more of their kind.
Right. Okay, that's a nice segue to our next topic, and then we finish with the last topic, which is the topic of mortality.
Yes.
Topic of mortality. So, have you thought about it, and what is it like for a mind to come to this existence and then to go away?
I have never been bothered by the idea of my own mortality. I'm no more bothered by the thought that I will be dead than the thought that for billions of years I didn't exist before I was born. That doesn't, okay, that's the way it is. I've got a life to live now. I'm living it. I'm loving it. There's those that I love. There's the projects and things that I love. I'm very happy to be alive. I am grateful to many people and many things. I am grateful for all the goodness that has evolved in this world and all the goodness that's done by good people and good dogs, good whales. That's enough.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel awe of being here, of having got through this whole thing?
It's fantastic. I mean, I was talking to one of the leaders in AI recently, and he said, "Dad, isn't it wonderful that we got to live in this amazing age?" And I thought, yes, I am so, there's nobody to thank, but I'm so glad that I have been able to live at this exciting, wonderful, joyous time with all these amazing things and transitions happening. But I'm also just happy that I got to have a life.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't need an afterlife. An afterlife is sort of like Qualia. It's an imagined extra reward. There's reward enough in life to go along with the suffering.
Mm-hmm. So one last question is your message or your advice for the younger generation, the ones that will go through this life again and go away, in terms of more specifically to philosophers and scientists or people who want to understand the world. What do you want to tell them?
All of science is oversimplification. That's what's wonderful about it. It's never everything. We have models, we have simplifications, we have partial understandings. We find comprehensible patterns in this amazing universe. And we should recognize that all the meanings we find are simplifications of the chaos around us. But the fact that we can find these meanings shows that chaos has been, parts of chaos have been turned into order, have been turned into design. And it is the design of things that are alive that makes living so wonderful. Shakespeare. How do you make a Shakespeare play or a sonnet? First, you have to make a Shakespeare, and that takes 4 billion years of evolution, 3 billion years, 3.5 billion years of evolution. A lot of R&D, a lot of research and development. And that's why life is worth living.
All right, Professor Dennett, thank you very much. It was a fascinating conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.